So I want to ask a couple of questions, and any of you on the panel are free to answer. You don't all have to answer, but also if you in the audience have a burning desire to answer the question too, from where you sit and from with your perspective, please raise your hand, and let's get a conversation going for this last closeout of the day. So, given all this wonderful information, you guys have given us an extremely good overview through ag tech pilots and the funding and community development and education and tech hub and educating the future of our tech workforce, which is awesome, and ag tech. There's so much great work happening, and yet we're here because we need to pull this together and keep it moving and build on it. So what are in your minds, anybody's minds out there, the top actions we need to take now? What do we need to do next? What's really missing? Even if it's been said, but it needs to be re-said, just give us in your minds, what are the top actions we need to take now? I'll call on people if no one pipes up.
I'll get us started here. I think we need to continue to engage the private sector, the internet service providers themselves. They need to be continually updated on the needs that they're, as much as they do to invest in our communities, there still exist gaps, and it isn't always incentivized for them to close those gaps in some of the most rural, disadvantaged parts of our region. It just doesn't pencil out for them many times, and so we need to find ways to, in my opinion, to work with them, both the small providers and the larger providers, to continue to have a dialogue and to find solutions. So it's great to see in the panel before that there were a couple of ISPs represented up here. I think we need to continue to have more of them present at these type of convenings to get their input as well.
Let me dive in on that a little bit more. When we say engage the private sector, are we asking them for them to help foot the bill along with public dollars? And are there good examples of that working and that we can build on and models that we can leverage? And feel free, anyone.
I think that's one recommendation.
I mean, and you're right. One of the challenges I saw working through Comcast, it was the red tape that we have to go through. A lot of the process, especially in the industry we're in. And in the sectors that you guys need the advanced technology, for that matter, you will have to go to somewhere like Philadelphia, and those conversations will come back with an ROI. Does it make that business sense? And so for me to go ahead and write that check, I will have to literally prove, in fact, that there will be a profit coming out of it. Switch back to what Vast Networks has done, which is literally a company based out of Fresno, utilizing the infrastructure that was built with grant money. And as I talked about earlier, being able to distribute a 5-mile infrastructure in 8 days, which will never happen under any condition with any of the bigger companies, to a school that needed it in 10 days. So that, to me, changed the way that I particularly view the industry as a whole. And I worked in telecommunications for such a long time. So you're right. I think that there is a disconnect in that we, as providers, just don't know a lot of what the need is. And when we do, then the conversation was asked early. So how do we start it? Who do we talk to? And for me, will be to know who is the individual that actually manages your network. It doesn't have to be your IT person. There's someone within your company that knows what the pain is. He's the person that's going to tell me, or she, what is it that needs to be done. And then we begin to work and bring in other entities or groups that can work with us. Ultimately, we want to pay for it. And Mike is gone, so I can say that. I try to pay 100% of the time. I try to pay for it, and I almost always get away with it. So I'm telling you, let me know what the needs are. Jake, I would love to talk to you guys. I mean, the things you guys are doing, and I've been following you guys since you came into the industry. It was an awesome time for me to see technology grow in our communities the way you guys have done it. But we need that help. We need to know, what are your projects like? What is it you're looking to do, so that I can tell Mike and whoever else, we need to build our infrastructure. And we need to make it so that its operational cost is low and still bump a lot of speeds that they can then use. Because the moment that we come into an area where we can give you faster speeds, it makes it easier for me to then target the next opportunity, I won't have to spend another $100,000 or $150,000. It might cost me another 20. So Mike will say, go ahead and do it. But when I start at 500,000 and then to cut back on that, those are the conversations that we look at.
And if I can add to that, I would also, add that, not just, as I mentioned in my comments, building it isn't enough. You have to provide that technical assistance, that capacity for the end recipient of the infrastructure of the technology, whether it be on the farm, at the municipal level, at the school district, at the household. They have to know how to optimize what they have in front of them. We use the example of that small community, but there's, the households that we assist, we encourage them to go through the training, because getting the hardware is fine, but if you don't know how to use the smartphone, then what purpose is it? What does it serve you if it's just going to sit there? When I sat on a local school board out here in this part of the valley. Our district had distance learning technology with other school districts, and one of the questions I asked about that was, how often do we use it? We're like, well, we've never used it. I'm like, then why do we have it? Why haven't we put it to use to offer some of these online, courses to our students? And so I don't think building it is enough. I think it needs to be coupled with training and capacity building.
A lot of it's market driven as well, and
Right.
We are constantly investing in technologies to improve our service, improve our broadband speeds, our reach. I think Adelina mentioned the Microsoft project, the TV Whitespace. We're actually involved in that and lighting up a pilot with one of our big agribusiness customers down in Kern County. And we think that has terrific potential. About 10% of our customers or potential customers we can't serve because of the line of sight limitations of our technologies. But this TV Whitespace technology allows us to serve customers, and we're very interested in that. We want to serve as many customers as we possibly can, and are constantly making investments to do so.
Great.
That's exciting to hear. I think one of the things also we talked about, we heard throughout, is education. But it isn't, I think, like it was said earlier, Robin, you really need to look at what areas do you really need to educate on. So yeah, what are the true needs? Some education on really explaining what broadband is and why you need it and all of that, but really kind of develop a list and then figure out, okay, who needs to be educated on that. But the other thing I think that is really important, and I agree with you on the white space, because you guys have a lot of, if we have flat land, it would be kind of here. Everywhere else, we definitely have every challenge we could have in California. But the other thing that I've seen as far as models, Gabe, there are some nonprofits out there, and Scenic was definitely one of them. When Scenic first started, what they did was mentioned earlier. They actually went and they provided, high speeds to the administrative offices, for education, and they actually had quite a bit of funds, and so we kept saying, is there other things that you can do? And through that, Lewis Fox is just a great president, CEO, and so what they've now done is they're now, as some of you I think have said, they also are doing libraries, which that was another thing. And I know that they've been having, or they were having about a year ago, some initial discussions about possible, or just discussing telehealth, and could that be an opportunity or things. So you never know, what opportunities are out there. And so I think, just like what was said earlier, that just kind of bring people together, bring groups together, and just kind of throw ideas just out of the box, just kind of whatever, because no idea is a bad idea. And it's going to be possibly one or two of those that are going to really help your area to really keep moving forward. So I would just also be looking at nonprofits, anything like that too, because there are opportunities there.
Gladys?
So just to jump in on the same vein, you talked about models, or asked about models for rural communities. Historically, the electrification of rural communities is a model. Bringing water to rural communities is a model. And so as part of that, the civic engagement and the education of your elected officials at every level, local, county, regional, and then your legislators on these issues to make sure that they're aware. Everybody knows what broadband or internet is and how crucial it is, but what are the ins and outs and the gaps of your communities? That's really important for them. And then I like one of the questions you asked, prompted us with, Gabe mentioned uncommon collaborations. And that's really what this is about for rural communities. That's crucial. The business case works from the incumbents up to a certain point, and then the rest of it is medium to small mom and pop ISPs that make the business model work in really remote communities, because those are the hardest to reach. So that it looks very different at every stage, right, depending on what the community gap is and how big it is and so on and how remote it is. So I thought those were good.
Great.
And one last thing, Gabe. The other thing I'd also like you to consider is your tribal communities. The reason I say that is because, as we mentioned Yolo County earlier, and Assemblywoman Aguiar Curry, she actually had a relationship with the Ochadihi tribe, which is Cache Creek in that area. And due to her relationship, she, over a couple of years or whatever, she was able to have them actually donate, I want to say something like $600,000 to the city of Winters, which they purchased devices for all the grades from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And there was even a continuation school. Now, your need may be different with, distance learning and things, because I think that would help also. And again, I'm not sure of how large, your tribal community is in there. I do know that within California, we do have 109 federally recognized tribes and over 50 non-federally recognized tribes, which are the most in any state. And realistically, not all of them, even the casinos, the ones that have the casinos, in some instances really aren't making a lot of money. You've got, yes, some of them that are doing very well. But I think if you start to look at those partnerships, the governor does have a tribal liaison, and so an advisor, and currently I think she just retired, but they do have somebody in there as acting. I would encourage to just reach out, because you never know what other opportunities you're going to be able to leverage from that.
Great. Okay.
I have a comment real quick. Sorry.
Great.
2 comments real quick, just to add what Ismael and the panelists say it a little bit. Really, the partnership with the ISPs is key in this part, because we have Gladys, Sonny McPeak, and Deputy Sendejas advocating for broadband at the state level. Then there's money like $300 million set aside for infrastructure, and yet none of the local ISPs are applying for it. And so even though 99% of us here in this room want to apply for it, none of us can, because we're not an ISP. And so making that connection with those people that can actually leverage those funds to bring broadband to the local level, we need to make that connection. And there's only 2 or 3 ISPs here. So we really need to have this kind of forum, but invite the ISPs, whether they're
Do you want to maybe tell everybody what an ISP is, in case no one...
So the internet service providers who are actually providing the broadband, your AT&Ts, your Comcast, but even the smaller local folks that can provide or fill in the gap where those internet providers that are bigger don't want to, because there's not a profit for them to go into Huron and add $300,000 worth of line so that they can get 20 more customers. So then how do we work with that? Because it's not only the community of Huron or the community of Kalinga, it's all the ranchers that really need this, right? So it's that connection. And then it's really, we have advocates at the state level, and they're doing their job, but then the money's there and it sits there. And LA and San Francisco take most of the money because we're not applying for it.
Well, Bass is going to take it all.
There you go.
Well, yeah. 2 more here.
So one thing I just want to say about ISPs applying for funds. There is a lot of the conversation has regarded around what's served, underserved, and unserved. Those terms keep shifting. As an ISP in a certain area, you go, okay, this might be underserved according to this one program and unserved over here. But right now, I'm there putting in my capital with my company, trying to serve it as best I can. And according to my statistics, it's a served thing because it's available there to 95% of the people. You then look at the state level, who are looking at 2-year-old voluntary data and going, it's underserved. So it might be available for funds. Then you look at 3.5-year-old data that another division and another definition is looking at, and it's completely unserved. So what you have is, yes, there are funds there, but trying to get each level to understand exactly what we're talking about, to figure out how we get those funds to the right places, because what's happening, unfortunately, is the smaller ISPs, especially fixed wireless, because we are line of sight, it's harder to verify, except by going house to house to house with a guy on the roof with the equipment to say, yes, this house is there, that house is not. We can't just say, okay, we put fiber along this whole road so everybody can get it. It's far more difficult to make those judgment calls. So I know CETF is working with the CASF funds and 1665 to kind of figure that all out. And it's about a year out, maybe? But that's one of the big issues. So it's not like we don't want to go for the funds. We just know that it's a mess. And most of us are small organizations. I have 10 people that work in my company, 3 sets of brothers, my dad and I. I mean, it's a small company. and 1 best friend. But we're trying our best to serve our neighbors. We're putting up that next tower to hit those 40 people because it's somebody's aunt and they want service. The other stakeholder, I'll just jump to the next thing. The other stakeholder that I think needs to be involved in the conversation is county and building officials. Because they can do a lot to slow down the adoption of things or speed up the adoption of tower sites going up, trenching efforts.
Where's our county representation in the room?
I do have one quick question. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Nathan Vosburgh. I'm the mayor of Kalinga, and I'm also representing the largest stakeholders around this area because I am the IT person for the library system. Kalinga Huron Library, and let me tell you, it has been a battle to get internet. When I first started the library, we had 3x3, which is to service all these different folks of 3,000 households in Kalinga to like 1,000 households into Huron, 12,000 people in Kalinga to 6,000 people in Huron, and it's nowhere near enough. So what we did was we partnered up with Scenic, and we were able to get those broadband funds, to start helping along the way. But what happened is that people are like, well, this is great, we can come to the library, but what happens when we come home? So now I'm the mayor, and this is what I hear every day. And we don't have internet, so we can learn, but we can't create. And we have almost 100% of the people at their houses that have desktops, computers, have 1 megabyte or less of upload. And that's from AT&T, and there's no intentions on giving us any more. I know I've asked them. AT&T also has no intentions from what our previous conversations are in build-out of our community because they stated that even if they doubled the price on everybody and everybody was on, they still wouldn't infinity make their money back for the solution. So I started using the same terms for the fundage that has been in place for a long time that I believe that have not been used in rural areas. They've been used in rural areas that are right next to very largely populated areas so that they can get those people interconnected. But I don't think we've seen a whole ton of action in real rural areas like Kalinga and Huron and places in the west side area. So one of the things that we are struggling with is limitations, If you go by the broadband reports, which I used to own a wireless company, and so I did those broadband reports and the census tracts, it's very difficult, just like she stated, for a wireless company to provide that data. And what's good for one customer may not be good for the other. So when they look at Kalinga, they're going to say, oh, well, you can get 3 megabytes or 10 megabytes from an unwired company, but yet what they aren't taking into consideration is the price cost. They're not considering what the download speed is on that. You may be able to get a 10 by 10, but what's up with Fresno throwing 300? They got 300 megabits in download and like 100 megabits in upload from Comcast in Fresno, and here in Kalinga, we're struggling to get 20 megabytes on the download and 1 megabit on the upload. So what I hear a lot of in my community, which is a large minority base, is it's not equitable at all. And so people are very unhappy, especially in Huron. And in Huron, they actually ask our library, how come it is you guys have 100 by 100 and we only have 10 by 10? And you know, it's a population thing. We get the money from the grants, we push it on, and determining by population is actually also determining by those census blocks that we were looking at earlier. If you look, the Fresno area, the Clovis area is running in the 30s, and then you come out to where there's low population, and now we're in the 60s. Well, I believe that that's because there's no reason for these companies to come here. However, I've learned and I've listened, so this is going to take community buy-in from private and public. And so my question is, how does a small community like Kalinga that is mostly ag-driven, a lot of minority, how do we get community buy-in from the tech places and from the businesses? Because a lot of the businesses in Kalinga are not even tech savvy. You know, so they don't even know the opportunities that exist for themselves. So we just would like to, you know, is there some help that we can get to kind of look at our stakeholders and explain to them, hey, what can we do to help out your business? And then at the same time, maybe we could use, you know, like the city's going to be getting 300 from AT&T. The library's got 100. I'm sure the colleges have got gigabits, right? The schools have got gigabits. So if we have all this bandwidth, what's holding them up from us saying, hey, why don't you look at us as a whole? You know, we're spending the money to get this bandwidth. Why won't you give it to our citizens? And so I'm sorry, but that's a multifaceted question with a whole bunch of data, but it's very important to our community. And every probably 2 or 3 council meetings, what I hear is, you know, how come we can't have internet? So that's my question.
You know, and that's a valid conversation to have. I think this is the biggest opportunity I've seen in the marketplace for my industry in the last 7 years. You're coming at a time where you're having this conversation and is allowing us to put our heads together and come out with a solution. And it's going to be a tailored one. I can tell you now, it won't be cookie cutter in the sense that it's already been done with Comcast. We can deliver 100 gigs. No problem. I talked to Mike before, last night after we were devouring a beautiful steak. Thanks to Robert. Yes. And it was awesome. But we had this conversation late last night, and I said, listen, what can we do? And he says, well, I just pull up our charts. We're 2 miles away. There's no reason why we wouldn't drop 100 gigs if we needed to. So that's not even a conversation for us. We can actually make that happen. Okay, so we bring it up to a certain point. Then we need to talk to you guys. It's okay, so how do I get it to that location? And then bring in someone who can then transfer the vast amount of speed that we're going to give you and be able to have those students be able to log in. And now they're going to be able to do it because there's just so much of it. It's going to be crazy. So, but he needs to have these conversations. You know, and again, and I will tell you this now, price, I've learned with Comcast is a set in stone investment, with Vastus being unique. And I think it's because it's a community-driven environment. I've been able to give someone a gig for what they've been paying for 30 megs of symmetrical fiber. You're talking about literally hundreds of times what they are used to, and they still can't believe it. So for us, pricing and speeds, I don't want to say they're irrelevant, but I'm pretty liberal with it. Somebody tells me I'm paying $3,000 for 50 megs up and down. I said, well, if I give you 500 for it, 1,500. Sure. Yeah. They look at me, 500 megs up and down. Yeah, symmetrical. It's new technology. It's going to be brand new point to point. They're not used to having that conversation. They're thinking, okay, that's going to cost me, what, $10,000? Well, you could pay that to Comcast if you wanted to, but I'll charge you less, but you allow me to then bring it up to that point and be able to then service someone else who actually needs it. So to us, pricing and speeds are not irrelevant, but we can play with that if we know what those needs are. And if you're willing to participate, I can cover most of it, but there are times where, it's not physical to deliver to that farmhouse. I have a lot of IT guys that I work with. they are the go-to people
Ricardo,
that I have a conversation.
You're at your time limit now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gabe, I think you had
All
a
right.
question over here. There
Let
was
me, well, first let me, give you the panel the opportunity to say, did you have any responses to that great question by the mayor? And Ricardo, thank you. Great response. Probably one more kind of question. I'm going to turn it over to Stu to keep us going on the action item.
I didn't have a
rollout.
response to that question. The only thing I wanted to offer was just to reiterate and remind those that are still here that the workforce component of this discussion should not be forgotten either. As technology and automation continues to penetrate agriculture, food and beverage processing, the reality is it's going to displace human beings who are going to be substituted by drones and tablets and phones. And so we really need to continue to have those retraining programs to make sure that those individuals have the opportunity to acquire skills to be the tablet operators, to be the drone operators. And so that they don't have to confront that could be a harsh reality. So I think and I think West Hills has done a great job in being proactive on that end, and I'd love to see more of that kind of activity, because that is a reality, and it's something that we should not forget. As great as technology is, that the tractor driver, used to be on that tractor may not be needed in 5-7 years, and so, and I do want to just call out and thank Rebecca Miller, who's here. 59 Days of Code. Her and Jake have been doing great work out in Mendota and Fireball. Last weekend, they had a great event where they're starting to plant the seed with our K-12 population out in the West Side. And I think it starts with something like that, where you start showcasing and demonstrating these technologies to our youth and let them know that, hey, agriculture is a lot different from what your parents' experiences of agriculture is, because a lot of these parents, mine included, want us to stay the heck away from agriculture as far as we can, because they have one way of thinking of agriculture, and that's bending over the hot sun, and that's not what agriculture is in this day and age. And so events like yours really shed a light on the new reality of agriculture and the opportunity that exists to target those youth to be the workforce of the future for these farms of the future. So kudos to you guys.
All right. With that, let's thank our panel. And I'm going to make two quick observations and turn it over to Chancellor Van Horn. One is that it seems to me like one emerging theme has been the conversation with our local broadband providers. And that dynamic that we're seeing here, I think, is really powerful. And I think we're bringing them into the conversation in ways they haven't been before. And I like to invite us to build on that as we work together, because they're going to help us be the kind of doers to get this done. The second is, it strikes me that we have an opportunity for a model that leverages, a public-private partnership and maybe a cooperative model that we can build on to really enable our local providers to utilize the great work that we've done in an investment with Scenic and our libraries and our telehealth locations, our universities, our schools, to build off of as part of the middle mile solution as we build from it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Van Horn.
How about a great hand for Gabe? Thank you very much. I'm good.